even though it wasn't what I expected it to be, it ended up being the right place for me. Camp will just grab you and will just take a hold of you, and you'll go back summer after summer.
Mate, before camp, I didn't know that existed.
I think it's definitely something you shouldn't take for granted.
So coming in this morning with the weather being the way it is, these have got no grip. No grip.
We slipping and sliding all over the place.
Came straight out the train station. There's one part that's covered, and then there's one part that isn't. I was in a bit of a rush because I'm like, okay, we're filming this early, so I need to get down.
Yeah.
First step. Done essentially the splits. Rush hour outside Moorfield Station. Everyone looking at me. I was there like, oh my word.
It's happened to the best of us, mate.
It's always the way, especially like now, with it kind of being. I've always felt like, have you got this as well? Whenever it gets to June and everyone's starting to go back to summer camp, you see it on like social media and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I swear to God, as soon as you know that everyone's going over there, the weather's going to be incredible, it buckets down.
Yeah. Well, I guess the caveat to that also is when it rains in America, it rains, you know.
Well, by the way, it rained this morning like even here, and I know where I'd rather be. You know?
True.
It's one of those where I'm thinking.
Well, look, we've had a couple of weeks of like really nice weather, so I guess this was like due to happen sooner or later.
And that's how I know that I was getting older. I think I said this to you yesterday as well, but I was just there like, well, the grass is getting a good water. Oh no!
I feel the way about my car as well. I'm like, if it rains, like at least my car will get washed. So,
see, that's the thing, is it? Like, it shows like we're getting older than that, because part of me's there going, you get back to summer camp, you can almost be a child again, can't you? Instead of having these adult conversations.
Exactly.
But, so yeah, probably a good place to start. A bit of a different location. This one, I think, this is what, episode 7, episode 8, 6, 7, 8.
It's
I'm
6.
Losing track. But it's actually cool to do it somewhere a bit different. We've come downstairs from the office today instead of filming there. Come for a nice coffee at Nova Scotia. So shout out the guys to letting us to film here and everything. Mm-hmm. But it's one I'm enjoying because obviously we're good mates sort of off camera and everything. But you're normally the wizard behind the scenes that's filming.
That's why you always call me wizard.
The exec producer.
Honestly, like, I feel like a fraud sometimes. Like, people say, "Oh, you're a wizard." Like, this so I'm just like,
oh, mate. Well, you look at the quality of the stuff that you do put together, and in comparison to what I do, mate, it looks like I'm filming on a Nokia 3310. I could have all the equipment, and it still wouldn't look as good.
I will say though, like, one thing I do love about my job in particular, and I'm getting ahead of myself a bit here, but one thing I do love is you can clearly see like what I do.
Yeah,
it's like, obviously, like, a lot of the stuff. Not to denigrate anyone that does more like back end stuff. Obviously, that stuff's still important. Yeah. But a great thing about what I do is like I can show someone that this is what I do and this is how it's like impacting the business and that kind of thing. So yeah, I really enjoy that about my job. But you know, I
was going to say, it is such a visual type of thing which you do, and I think that's what summer camp is as well. There's so many sort of visual influences and stimulus when you're there and stuff. But for those that don't know who you are or what you do, apart from being the wizard, do you want to give a bit of an introduction about you, what you do for the business, and then also where you went to camp, a bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm Byran. I am the digital content producer for Smaller Earth. So I work across all their brands. So Camp Leaders, Camp Canada, Resort Leaders, American Camp Co., and the rest of it. I mainly focus on video marketing. So creating videos, kind of like video strategy. How can we make video really like impact the business and help us hit our goals for the business? So a lot of the videos you see that come out from each of those brands are mainly come from me, from an editing perspective and from like a conception perspective as well. But obviously like a lot of input from the team. But in terms of like making those videos happen, that's kind of like where my role is. And I went to camp. My first summer at camp was actually, it makes me feel so old now, but my first summer at camp was actually 2013.
Wow.
Yeah, ages ago. That was my first summer. And I actually went back for 7 summers to a small camp in New Jersey called Camp Dark Waters, honestly the most ominous name ever.
I was going. By the way, cool name as well. Dark Waters.
Well, the reason why it's called Dark Waters is because we don't have a lake, we have like a creek, and the creek is brown, so hence Camp Dark Waters.
Fair enough.
And it's a very, very small Quaker camp. There's only like about 100 kids. And honestly, when I first got there, and I mentioned this on one of the videos on YouTube, like when I first got there, honestly hated it.
Yeah.
Because like our job is quite hard as marketers for camp leaders, especially because you can't encapsulate every single camp in like a piece of like marketing material.
Yeah.
So when I'm creating like videos for camp leaders to kind of promote the program, it's so hard you can't get every aspect of camp into one video.
Yeah.
And we work with so many camps. Every camp is different.
And it actually is, though, isn't it? Like people, it's hard to say each one's got its own sort of personality or soul, but it genuinely does. So it's like you've just summed up quite nicely. It's dead hard to kind of go, okay, well, how do you encompass all of that?
Yeah.
When each one's so different.
Exactly. And I think when people see our content and our videos and stuff, I think you do obviously start to build up an idea of what you think this camp is going to be like. But it all just kind of depends on like what camp you end up going to. And if that camp you go to doesn't match the idea that you have in your head, it's like, oh, well, this isn't what I was expecting. This isn't the experience for me. And like the first week you're there, you can kind of feel, oh, maybe I made the wrong decision. Like this isn't what I expected it to be. And that's definitely what I was feeling when I first went to camp.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, I can't imagine going to any other camp now. Like, even though it wasn't what I expected it to be, it ended up being the right place for me. Did you go back to the same camp each time? How many times did you go back? Yes, I went back 7 summers. I know, it's crazy. But like, once you're there, you kind of do feel part of the community and you make bonds with like the staff and the kids and you just kind of like, I can't see myself going. You feel like a bit of a traitor, like just kind of go. Not to like, obviously people do go to different camps, but not to say that's a bad thing to do. But for me, I just felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. I have all these connections, all these bonds with people. I couldn't see myself going somewhere else. Yeah. So that's kind of why I went back for 7 summers. And also, if you go back to the same camp, it's like you kind of build yourself up into. You can progress through the levels. So like, I think when I was at camp, obviously I started as a counsellor, but by the time I left, I was like part of the admin staff, and it's kind of like a clear path. You can see like you're a counsellor first, and you kind of like work your way up, and obviously pay gets higher, more responsibility. And I think I was a counsellor for 2 summers, then I got put on admin staff for my 3rd summer. I was only 20 years old. Yeah. I kind of got bumped up like early because they were like struggling to find people. So it's kind of like you're the oldest counsellor. Like I guess you're gonna have to do it. Yeah. But then that job ended up being one of my favorite jobs at camp. So I was looking after the 15 and 16-year-olds who didn't take the CIT program. Yeah, yeah. And because I loved that so much, I did that for 4 summers, and that's kind of like why I kept on going back. And then in my last summer, I did photography and video stuff. So,
mate, do you know I don't know why, but I had thought that you'd done sort of photography and videography for like longer as well. So it was like. So did you have that as like a passion like beforehand, or was that something which has developed just over sort of growing up basically?
Yeah. You know what's funny? I think it's camp that got me into photography and video, because at my camp,
picturesque place, isn't it? No matter where you go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think because at my camp, obviously at some camps, bigger camps, you have like dedicated like media teams. Yeah. So people whose job it is to literally take photos and videos. Yeah. But because my camp is so small, we don't have that. So it was literally like down to the counsellor to just take. We had like a camp camera. And then anyone could just use it to take photos and stuff. Yeah, exactly. And I think because I was doing that so much, I was kind of, this is cool. But it never really became a passion for me. Maybe like I started doing that one summer, and then the next summer I kind of did a bit more, to the point where I was like, I really, really do enjoy this. And that's kind of just grew from there. I think if it was for camp, I don't think I'd be doing this. I wouldn't be making videos.
Said the same.
Literally, it sounds a bit cliche, but I honestly wouldn't be doing this, and I love it. So
it's true, because it opens doors. I can't remember who it was that I was speaking to about it, but yeah, on one of the podcast episodes we were there saying how like we're involved in cultural exchange. So cultural exchange is sort of the overall industry, the sector, area, whatever you want to call it. Mate, before camp I didn't know that existed. Didn't know it existed. And then like I think just by going to camp, obviously you get the memories and stuff, but it does open doors, and whether that is even returning or going off into the industry.
Literally, and like, I think, because when I first went to camp, it wasn't even my idea. It was like, my brother was going to do it, and then he was like, oh, we should do it together. So they had to wait for me to turn 18 to do it. and I don't know why, but he didn't end up doing it, and I just did it. And like, I thought it would just be a one and done thing. I'll do it for one summer, it'll be a great experience, and then I'm back home doing whatever. But then I think for certain kinds of people, there will be people out there that can go for one summer and be like, I had a great experience, it was amazing, but now I want to like do something else. But then for other people, it's like camp will just grab you and it will just take a hold of you, and you'll go back summer after summer. And I think I was just one of those people. Part of me was just kind of like, I was at uni, didn't have anything else to do in my summer. I was like, obviously I'll go back to camp. But then when you start doing that, even after uni, then you know that camp has really, really got you. And I think by that point, because I've done it for like 3 summers by then, I was just kind of like, I love this place.
That's your thing.
I love working here. Like, it just became, okay, summer's here, I'm going back to camp, you know? But yeah, and I think, I mean, as I said before, it's opened doors for me in terms of, I mean, working for this business. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't work for camp. My love for photography and video wouldn't have happened if I didn't work at camp. And obviously, not to mention the amount of friends that I have now that live in America and all around the world because of camp. It's like, I mean, everyone said it on every podcast we've done, but it really is true. Like, it's just crazy.
The moments that you get from it as well. I think you mentioned a little earlier where you go, from a marketing perspective, it's solid, isn't it, in terms of trying to be able to encompass or capture these memories, because you have so many different memories and it can vary from camp to camp and place to place and year to year. So you've been back 7 years, which is incredible, to be fair. And like you said, eventually when you get to a stage where you like just love the place that much, you would. What was in between your first and second year, when you were first considering, would I go back or not? Was it a consideration, or were you just like, mate, I am there next year? Or did you have to almost convince yourself, go, shall I give it another one? Or what was the tipping point?
That's a very good question, actually. I think...
Thanks, mate. I'm good at this.
You're getting good at this. Only took you how many episodes now?
Yeah, I'm going to say, it's not my first rodeo.
No, you know what? I think this is... So when the summer comes to an end, and everyone is going to experience this, kids will ask you, are you coming back next summer? When you get to the end of summer, kids undoubtedly ask you that question. And obviously, you don't want to disappoint kids. So sometimes you're like, I'm coming back, even though your mind isn't made up yet.
You were lying to kids? You terrible person. No, I know exactly what you mean.
But I
know exactly what you mean.
I think after my first summer, I think I knew that I wanted to come back, but whether I was going to come back or not relied on like my life and whatever was going on in my life. But I knew that I did want to come back, and I think there was a few reasons. One, because as I mentioned before, like the connections you make with kids and the staff is like really, really incredible, and I knew that I wanted to build on that for like another summer. And I think also I feel like I had more to give. Because I think your first summer, you're not going to be the most amazing counselor you can be in your first summer. Culture shock, getting used to a new environment. Maybe you haven't worked with kids that much. Massive learning curve. And I think, I mean, some people, they can go into it, hit the ground running, but for the majority of people, you'll be like finding your feet. It may you may not be the most amazing counselor. Not saying you won't do a good job, but second summer, you've already been there one summer. You know what's going on.
The training wheels are off.
Yeah, exactly. Then you can just kind of like full throttle, really, really go for it. And I knew that I wanted to have that experience where like I had one summer behind me, and I can go into next summer feeling like really confident about what it was that I was doing. So I think that for me was a real driver in terms of me wanting to go back for a second summer. But I don't know. I think after that first summer, I wasn't thinking I'm going to be here for 7 summers. I think I'll go back for another summer. Do the things I wanted to do that I didn't get to do my first summer, and that'll be it. But I mean, it just grabbed me, and then I was back for summer after summer. So
do you know what? I think it's no matter what it is, it's always class to find a community where you're like, do you know what? I fit in here. This is something where I'm valued. I offer a lot, and I feel like I can offer a lot as well. And I think that's the one thing which is cool about camp is in the beginning, everyone's completely new to it. But whether you go for 1 season, whether you're going for 2, 3, 4, 7, you end up kind of believing that you've got something to offer with it, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. What? How many summers did you go for?
Mate, I went for 1.
See, like, go on, like.
So I'll give you the reason on that as well, because I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Right. I went when I was not as though age is a limit, because on camp leaders
No,
it
yeah.
isn't. And I was on the water ski team. There was people that were in their 30s and absolutely loving it, still
Yeah.
going back. For me, it was just where my life went.
Yeah.
So I done it. I was late to uni. I done camp in between second and third year.
Yeah.
When third year finished, I was already planning to move to New Zealand, because
Yeah.
I've done Australia and other places in the past.
Yeah.
So it was just in terms of where my life went. I
Yeah.
can guarantee you right now, do you know, when it got round to May, June, where I was just sat in an office where I didn't want to be, I'm telling you right now, if that opportunity was there to then go to camp,
Yeah.
I would have just done it.
Yeah.
Because I loved it. I loved the job. I loved the
Yeah.
people. I offered a lot.
Yeah.
So it definitely does depend on your life circumstance as well, I would say.
Definitely. And I think, but sometimes I do think, oh, what if I didn't go back to camp?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what other opportunities would have? Because don't get me wrong, there was so many times where I put things off because I can't do that because I'm going to be away during the summer.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, it is a big commitment, like going away for 2-3 months during the summer.
Yeah.
And you will have to like pass up certain opportunities to like do that. And I think part of me kind of feels like, well, did I need to do it for like 7 summers? Don't get me wrong, I don't regret it. Like, I had every single summer was amazing. And I feel like it really has kind of like shaped my career and shaped who I am as a person. But I think no matter what decisions you make in life, you're always going to think, oh, what if I did something a bit different?
I think as well that that's one of those ones where that you can apply that to anything in life. Like,
Yeah.
you know, for example, I could say, imagine if I didn't, or if I did go to Greg's for lunch
Yeah,
today, and I
yeah,
would have
yeah.
bumped into someone that I wanted to meet
Yeah,
and stuff.
definitely.
I think especially with that, like,
Yeah.
did you say were you 18?
I was 18 when I first went, yeah.
So again, I'm thinking like you done your 7 summers
Mm.
before I'd even essentially got my first one done.
Yeah.
So for me, it was almost like an age consideration thing.
Yeah.
But even then,
Yeah.
by doing the one, here I am working in
Here
this
you
type
are,
of role,
yeah.
and it's opened that many avenues
Yeah.
just by doing the one.
Yeah.
However, the great thing is the fact that you can build on that
Yeah,
year
definitely.
on year.
Yeah.
And that's obviously kind of what you've done.
Definitely. And I think when you go back summer after summer, there are a few benefits to doing it as well. So, for example, at my camp paid for my flights every summer after my first summer to go back.
Yeah.
Obviously, money goes up the more experienced you are. And also, you get to see, I mean, because I went back for 7 summers, I got to see, like, camp change.
Grow
like,
with you, essentially.
Literally,
yeah.
like, when I first got to camp, we had, like, shared toilets. Toilets didn't have doors on them. It was just, like, these really, like, raggedy, like, curtain things.
Yeah.
So then, as time went on, the shared bathrooms became better. We got, like, a completely new dining hall. It used to be on the ground, but then it flooded. So one of the plans was to, like, raise it.
Yeah.
So, like, a tree house.
Nice.
So I got to see that. I got to see campers going from like as young as 10 years old to now being counselors. So I think when you do go through all the different summers, like you do get to be part of kind of like camp's growth,
Yeah.
camp's history. Not to like toot my own horn, but don't want to say I'm a camp legend or anything, but I feel like now at camp.
Big shot.
But no, I feel
Dark
like
Waters camp legend over here.
I feel like I contributed so much to camp. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a lot of people there like know me, and I feel like it's a place where I could go back at any time, and I will know people there.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
it goes back to that community thing, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
like, it's even the same for us. Like, we enjoy having good people around that
Yeah.
we can work with, that we can have a chat with. I think it applies to anything in life and any type of job you have. And camp just seems to promote that, doesn't it? Where everyone's like pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
There's good heads there.
Yeah.
And like, there's people that are just wanting to have a great summer as well. And the fact you can do that and make an impact at the same time, I can
Yeah.
see why it drags you back, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the thing. Like, it's hard to. I mean, we say this all the time, but you can't really describe camp to someone who hasn't been to camp.
Yeah.
And I think, even though it is a job, there's like a certain level of professionalism that you have to go into it with.
Yeah.
Looking after kids, it's an important job, and also a point. These kids love camp. I know that might be like a nothing statement, but like you don't really, like, they really really value camp, and being able to be a part of an environment that kids love so much, because for some kids, like this is an escape from like everyday life.
Yeah.
It may be kids' first time or only time during the year where they get to like be away from parents and like really, really develop some independence. So I think it can't be understated the work that you're doing at camp, even if you're not directly working. I mean, to some extent, if you're a counselor, you would work with children, but like even if you're in the kitchens, in the office, just having some sort of impact and contribution to creating that camp environment for these kids is super, super special and super, super deep. And I think it's definitely something you shouldn't take for granted.
It's an interesting one, that as well, because no one's mentioned that. And it's funny, it's harder for us being from the UK or Europe or anything like that, where you see summer camp films and stuff like that, and it's kind of as part of the culture and everything. You don't realize how big it genuinely, like, they live for it.
Oh,
like
man.
they can't wait for summer to come around, so they've got that freedom. And imagine having that as a young kid growing up over it. You'd be like, this is absolutely amazing. I didn't go to camp as a kid.
No,
Do you know what I
exactly.
mean?
And I think it's just I don't think camp. I mean, I'm always trying to imagine what camp would be like if we had it here in the UK, and it wouldn't be like camp in America at all.
No.
I think camp in America is its own kind of like cultural bubble, and I don't think you're really prepared for it until you actually get there. Obviously, we try to prepare people as much as we can, but it goes back to the whole like how difficult it is to market camp. You don't really know what it's going to be like until you're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And I think when I went back to camp, so I went back to my camp last year because obviously we did a content trip. I was in America, so I had to pop back.
I forgot you went back.
Yeah,
for the
I went back
as well. Yeah.
And it was so surreal because obviously I hadn't been there for 3 years, so I was gone for a while. But when you go back, like, even though I did feel as though I had a certain level of detachment from it now because I've been away for some time. I wasn't really working there. I was just visiting. But you still get to see. It's still nice to go back and be like, I had a level of impact on this camp environment. And you see like the new kids that come through. You see the kids that are now counselors. Like it's a really, really special moment. And like being able to see camp through those different goggles, like not actually working there for the summer, was kind of sad because obviously I wasn't working there anymore. But also it was very like special and very insightful, and I loved it.
So that's an interesting one because I was thinking like going back to even like say I take all emotion out of it and I just going back to an old workplace must be
exactly
a mad one. Was there any part of you that, because 7 summers is a lot of summers, was there any part of you that kind of went, oh, do you know what? There's a part of me that I could picture myself being here this summer? Or did you feel like after that 7 years you'd kind of completed that journey?
Well, do you know what it was? I think so. I was meant to go back in 2020, but obviously COVID happened. So I didn't get to go back. And part of me, obviously, I didn't want COVID to happen. But in terms of my decision of going back to camp, I feel like it needed to be taken out of my hands because I think I got to a point where I was just like, I'm going to go back. Go back whatever, yeah. So I was kind of happy that it wasn't up to me. And then I kind of had the year out and then it's kind of like, okay, I think I'm kind of like past camp now. But when I went back last year, I think part of me was like, I kind of missed this.
Yeah.
Because like you forget about all the little things about camp as well. So when I was there, I was kind of like, I miss this, like just hanging out with kids in the sand or whatever. You kind of forget those little things. But then also I was there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I wasn't really working, but I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if that's part of me like having done the content trip beforehand or whatever, but I was like, man, I don't think I could have done this for a whole summer.
Look, that's one thing as well. Like, depends how you're listening. If you're a first timer or if you're a returner. If you're a returner, you know that you keep going back despite how hard work it is. You are exhausted, but you end up loving it. If you're a first timer, you think, I'm just gonna have the summer of a lifetime. You're gonna have to put a shift in as well. You're gonna have to work, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it, though, isn't it? Is what you put in is what you get out.
Yeah.
And I mean, magnify that by 7 for you, and it's going to have a big impact on your life.
Definitely.
Isn't it?
But I think one of the benefits also about being a returner is you kind of do learn how to conserve your energy a bit. I think when you're like a first timer, you kind of want to go gung ho. You want to prove that you're a good counselor. You want to like just do everything all at once. And I think you can kind of burn yourself out. But then I think as you're a returner, you can you kind of get a better understanding of like where your energy is best spent.
Yeah, yeah.
And you kind of like learn like new strategies in terms of like how to recoup your energy and
Yeah.
make sure you get early nights and stuff like that. When you're younger, you kind of just want to, you get that
Oh,
FOMO.
you just go full throttle, don't
yeah,
you?
literally.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then when you get older, you kind of like, you know what? I'll get an early night tonight. I don't mind missing out on you guys hanging out for a night. I'm gonna get early night because I feel like I need it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're younger, you kind of like, oh, I want to do what everyone else is doing, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So obviously it comes with experience, but as you do more summers, you kind of do learn those like little tricks and tips on how to make the most of your summer.
I always thought that. I was always like, I wonder if I then went and done more, how I would manage the summer.
Yeah.
And like, would it be the same or not? Like Lizzie was on the last podcast or the one before, apologies for which one, but she was talking about some great wellness / coping strategies because it's something that you need. Did you feel like you kind of picked those up by learning through making mistakes summer on summer, and then you went, do you know what, well, this summer I'm going to do things a bit different, or this summer I'm going to do this or that? Or did you feel like you kind of had quite a consistent approach to camp each time you went back?
I think it was definitely different, and I think part of that comes with the job that you're doing.
Yeah.
So obviously, my first 2 summers I was working with the younger kids. I think they were ranged from like 8 to like 11 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that is going to be very different to me working with the 15 and 16-year-olds.
Oh, it's a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason why I loved working with the older kids was, one, you can have like proper conversations with them.
Yeah.
But then that comes with its own kind of things you need to worry about in terms of like, obviously you can have more real conversations with them, but obviously there's still boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think when you're with older kids, the boundaries can kind of sometimes get blurred a bit. So it's just important that you have those boundaries in place with the older kids. Whereas with younger kids, you kind of like know what those boundaries are anyway.
Yeah.
So I think definitely part of it comes with the job that you're doing. But I also think also when you are a returner and you see the new counsellors coming in, it's kind of easier for you to see the mistakes that they're making and how you can best do those things a bit differently.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're in it and you're doing those things yourself, it's kind of hard to see from your own perspective. Like
you
what
can't
you're
kind
doing
of take yourself out
of
of the situation.
Exactly. Exactly. But when someone else is doing them, you can be like, that's okay. You're doing something wrong or not the best way to do it, and I can figure out ways to like do that thing better. And I think having that certain level of looking from the outside kind of gives you a bit more perspective and how you can do things a bit differently.
Definitely.
So I think a lot of it came down to that. And I think also because when I was working with the older kids, that's when I became like part of admin staff. So like part of my role was actually managing the counsellors.
Yeah.
So because it was part of my job to kind of evaluate and like look at what the counsellors were doing, for me, I could take that and be like, hey, this is what they're doing.
Yeah.
I need to think of strategies of how they can do their jobs better, which in turn helps me do my job better as well. So I think a lot of it, obviously, and also a lot of it comes down to like being older. Obviously, you have more life experience. You learn things outside of camp that you can apply to camp. So it's just kind of like a whole mixture of both. But sorry, one last thing though. I think I really liked Lizzie's podcast because I've never really been someone that was, obviously mental health is important, but I've never really been that in tune with it. I've never really taken a step back and thought like, this is when I was at camp anyway. I never really took a step back and thought, oh, how can I do things to better protect my well-being and my mental health? It was always just me just doing things that I thought would help me, as opposed to me thinking about my mental health and well-being.
It was more instinctive, would you say?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, listening to Lizzie and like her laying it out and like things that you can do to kind of help that, I think really helps me, because in my first 2 summers, looking back, there were times where I felt overwhelmed, stressed, and at the time I didn't put it down to any kind of like mental health thing or well-being thing. I just kind of thought, these things happen up and down. But now looking back, I can definitely say that there were probably things that I could have done a lot differently, and implementing some of those things that Lizzie talked about would have probably helped me in those first 2 summers.
I think that's a good thing as being a returner, isn't it? Like you can then be aware of that type of stuff. And also very interesting you mentioned about the different age of kids and the stuff like that, because that is things that you can then learn, especially if you don't have experience with kids prior. I was very much sort of loved working with some of the older kids, the 15, 16-year-olds, because I could almost put myself in their shoes and go, I kind of know what's going through their heads, what they're thinking as they're going through the likes this summer. My partner, Adele, she's a pediatric nurse, so she is fantastic with the younger kids. And that's the thing. I think each person will have their own strength and stuff, but you might only recognize that after a couple of summers and stuff like that, which is cool. So one thing I do like to do with anyone that comes on the podcast is kind of have a bit of a deep dive into the social media side of things, because you are the wizard when it comes to photography and videography. So I know you're going to have some great content. Would it be okay if I hop onto your profile now?
No, we're not.
Oh, too late, it's happening. We'll find a couple about camp, and then if you talk us through the story. And I was about to say, Byron can then put it on the screen, but that's you. So I guess you'll be doing that as well afterwards. So
Mike's job is basically making more work for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get that screen record on here to make your job slightly easier.
Oh, cheers, mate.
Okay, so we'll go on. Okay, let's have a scroll through. And these are some professional shots here as well. It's almost like you do this for a living. Let's have a look. Okay, scroll through. Right, it's funny because I said this to Lizzie as well. It's like you can tell when the summer camp photos start coming up, because you have the likes of the lakes or the big groups of people and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's ask about this one actually, because I'm guessing if you're releasing a big balloon saying 25, it looks like you've probably spent your birthday at camp. What date's your birthday again?
Yes, my birthday is the 10th of July, which means for 7 summers I had my birthday at camp.
Yeah.
And obviously there's pros and cons to like having your birthday at camp. Obviously, having your birthday at camp, everyone makes a big fuss at you. Yeah. Like, you get treated so well. Super, super nice. Love that. But also, obviously, some people want to be with their families for their birthday. So obviously you don't have that privilege if you're at camp. But also, before that time, I had, 18 birthdays with my family. So I was kind of like...
I've done this before.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like fine. And I'm not someone who like particularly loves celebrating my birthday. So being at camp for my birthday wasn't really a huge deal for me. But no, as I said, people treat you super, super nice.
Especially if you're a regular there as well. You've been going back and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So one summer, the kids like made me a cake, which was like a blue cake, because they made it into the flag, like the UK flag. Yeah. And it was just like really, really blue, and it's turned your tongue blue. Like I think my poop was blue actually after eating that cake. I'm not even joking. I think my poop was blue after eating that cake. But just like nice stuff like that. It's just a good time. So yeah, I loved having my birthday at camp. I wouldn't let that be a deterrent for not wanting to go to camp, because it's just one day, and you'll be treated like super, super well. And if you want to have your birthday off, then have your birthday off, go and travel and do something nice.
Do you know, and I'd probably back that for graduations as well, because obviously a lot of people we have go are students.
Yeah.
There were a few people that had graduated when they were then at camp.
Yeah.
And everyone made such a big fuss of them and everything like that. And so, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I'd back that as well.
But don't get me started on graduation, because luckily my graduation, I say luckily, but my graduation was in November for whatever reason. Yeah. So that wasn't really an issue for me. But I had 2 graduations. So obviously I had my bachelor's graduation, but I also did a master's. So I had a master's graduation.
Nice you dropped that in there as well. I got my master's.
You know what? I feel like there's something that I don't really talk about having a master's, but I also feel like, it's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal, mate. You got to celebrate your wins.
No, exactly. So not going to graduation, like, it wasn't an issue for me because it was in November. But when I went to graduation, I was kind of like, it's just like 4 hours of like sitting down and going like
politely clapping.
Yeah, politely clapping for like courses you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And it's just all this time for you to go up for like 30 seconds to get like a fake. It's not even real. You get like the fake like prop. Or was it real? No, the fake thing when you take the photo is a real diploma. Yeah. You get the real one, but it wasn't for me at all. So for my master's graduation, I just didn't go, because I was just like, I'm not paying this money for like getting a crap and gown. I have to give it back anyway. So we'll say obviously it is important to. It's a big moment. Like, you graduate university, you spent 3-4 years there to get this degree. So don't get me wrong, like, it is a big deal getting that degree. But the graduation ceremony itself, for me personally,
long. It's long.
Mate, it is long. It's not, for me, it wasn't that great a thing. The more important thing for me was just like, obviously my family being proud of me and whatnot, but you don't have to have a big graduation for that to happen. Like, celebrate it at some other point.
And live your life.
Yeah, exactly. But this isn't me telling people not to go to graduation. It's just me giving my perspective and my opinion on it. Obviously, you're only going to have one unless you do like more degrees, but whatever. But yeah, I don't think it should play a huge part, because it's just one day at the end of the day. One day for what, a whole summer, you know? It's
I love it. I love it. So that's a one to consider for anyone who's thinking with graduations or birthdays and stuff like that. There's quite a few other ones here. What's this one about? So, I mean, Camp Dark Waters. What do we say to the God of Floods? What's going on here?
Oh yeah. So you know how I mentioned that my camp, there's a creek that runs along it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that creek floods.
Yeah.
So I think my first summer actually, I've got forced to mention this, but my first summer, the camp actually flooded. So we had to leave. We had to leave camp. So we had to go to like this meeting house where we took all the kids. We still had to have camp at the meeting house.
Yeah.
So we like did activities with them and whatnot, but obviously wasn't physically at camp.
Yeah.
So that summer, yeah, it flooded. And
you get some wild weather, can't you?
Literally, like the storms there are crazy. So I think, yeah, our camp was just prone to flooding. And this summer in particular was that 2019? Yeah, in 2019. So that was my last summer there. Luckily, it wasn't during camp. It was like during staff week.
Yeah.
But the camp flooded. And it was funny because all the councillors were off on a trip.
Yeah.
But a few of us stayed at camp. And it flooded whilst the councillors were out. So when we picked the councillors up, we were like,
Camp's underwater.
Camp's underwater, guys. You all got to leave. So everyone like had to go back home and like stay home for like a few days. But what was really, really nice about that is once like the water went down, all the councils came back and we got camp in shape for like to get kids there.
Love it.
Unfortunately, we had to cancel first session, but we were able to run the rest of the summer, and just having such a good group of people to get camp back into shape. I think it just showed like a real sense of community and just a love of the place. And I think it was a great thing. Obviously, we wish camp didn't flood, but I think being able to be part of a team that put camp like back together, like literally, like there were things. There was a ball box that was like on one side of the camp that ended up on the other side of the camp because the water just took it away. Like it was ridiculous.
It's a great shared experience as well.
Oh, definitely.
Especially when you go through those sort of moments where it is a bit more tough and everything. The weather's normally class, but whenever you have those rain days and stuff, it challenges you. It's part and parcel of it.
Definitely, and I think this was kind of like a good bonding experience because I think after that, the staff were like bonded throughout the whole summer.
Yeah.
Obviously, we could wish for a better way to bond us than camp flooding, but I think.
And your possessions floating down the creek. There I go. Can't seem to find any of my t-shirts. All gone.
Literally, but luckily, I think. Well, for me personally, like all my stuff was on like a higher level of camp, so it wasn't really affected.
I've got the high ground.
Exactly. Now I know what they meant in Star Wars. With that comment.
Star Wars quote, yeah.
But as I was saying about the dining hall, like, could we raise the dining hall? If that flood happened when the dining hall was still lower, we couldn't have run camp.
Yeah.
But luckily the dining hall was raised, so like everything in the dining hall was fine. But yeah, it was quite crazy.
I love that.
Quite crazy.
Do you know what? And I think that's a really cool one there, where it shows not just the good times that you have, but the fact you can turn the bad times into the good times.
Oh, definitely.
As well.
And I think camp is a good environment for that, because obviously with any job things go wrong.
Yeah.
And if you're at camp is a crazy place anyway. You're working with kids. Things are gonna go wrong. You're not gonna have a summer where everything is 100%, everything runs smoothly. Like things will go wrong.
Yeah.
And I think just being in an environment where you have people that care so much about where they work and the work that they do, when things do go wrong, you do really get this sense of everyone like banding together to like make things okay. Whether that's camp flooding or whether that's more of like a personal thing, like you're having a bit of a wobble, you're struggling a bit, you're feeling overwhelmed, people will rally around you and try and get you in a space where you are able to carry on.
Yeah.
And it's not something that you get at a lot of other jobs. No. Because literally you are living and working with these people. You're going to create amazing bonds. So everyone is looking out for each other. And I think from more selfish perspective as well, I think if you're not okay, that makes everyone else's jobs harder to a certain extent, especially if you're working with like a co-counselor, you're looking at the same set of kids. If your co-counselor isn't okay, that makes your job a lot harder.
Yeah, for sure.
So you kind of do take it upon yourself to like get them back on track, to like help you out a bit, which can be seen as like a selfish thing, but also you got to do what you got to do, you know?
You got to do what you got to do.
So I think, camp is the place where you will have wobbles, but just know that there are people in place, the right systems in place to get you back on track.
Well, do you know, one thing I've loved about this conversation as well is it's cool speaking about kind of returning to camp and hearing that, because a lot of the podcasts we've done's been all around, say, first timers initially going. The cool thing with this is this podcast will have a big impact still on first timers, because as you're going through this and when this is released, people might be already be starting to go, I think I need to come back here year on year on year. So I absolutely love it. One thing I would love to do, and I do with everyone, is a bit of a roundup.
Really? You do that with everyone?
With everyone.
Mate, I just didn't even notice, you know?
Yeah.
I wasn't
Not
prepared.
my first rodeo. So I always ask for 5 things which you can say for people going for the first time of summer. However, it's not going to be for the first time. If someone has been to camp or someone is at camp, what are the 5 tips or bits of advice, bits of guidance you would give to those people considering going back?
I love this. This is a good one, actually. I think, first of all, take a step back and really decide if it's right for you. So as I said before, like you will have to give up opportunities back home to go to camp. Like, it is a commitment.
Absolutely.
But we all know camp is an amazing place, and you kind of can get sucked into it. So I think just really think about whether it is the right decision, and almost like have a plan for it. So like, if you do want to go back, maybe say you want to go back for 2 more summers, 3 more summers, whatever it may be, and try and like stick to that plan if you can. Because I think for me, I didn't really have a plan. It's just like, oh, another summer, I'm going back to camp, kind of a thing. But I think if I had more of a plan in place, that might have helped me a bit. So yeah, first one, just decide if it's actually the right thing for you to do.
Take a step back, and then number 2, make a plan.
Yep.
Love it.
Third one, probably. So when you go back to camp, you don't necessarily have to go back and do the same things you've done before. Especially if you have like a good relationship with the camp director, you can go back and do other things. And if camp wants you back, they trust you, then they're more willing to like be open to you maybe having like a different role. So don't be afraid to maybe negotiate different roles. If there's something that you really want to do that you haven't done yet, speak to camp director. Maybe they can make it work for you.
Love it.
So in my last one of the things I really wanted to do was the photography and video stuff. We didn't have a role for that before, but I spoke to them and said, this is something that I feel we can benefit from. And then they brought me back to do that. So yeah, think about other things you might want to do. That's another one.
Love it.
Fourth, man, this is hard actually for returners.
It's not as though you've had 13 episodes to then prepare your answers. Don't worry about it.
I think if you are going back, make yourself a person that be open to being that person for first timers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they will naturally look to you. And I think it's so easy to get, because you've been there for so long, it's so easy to get caught up in that routine.
Yeah.
Where you kind of like forget that this is people's first timers here.
I love that one.
And yeah, I think always just be cognizant of that. And I think always be cognizant of that, no matter whether it's the first week of camp or the last week of camp. It's still their first summer there. Even if they've been there for like 7 weeks, it's still their first summer there.
It's all new.
This will be their last week of camp. So I think no matter how long they've been there for, always be a person that's willing to talk and help those first time counselors along. And the last one is kind of ties into the last one, but don't get complacent.
Yeah.
Because I think, as I mentioned before, like, because you have been there for so long, you kind of just feel like, oh, you know the routine, you know everything. Like, you kind of can not push yourself. Yeah. But I think no matter how many times you go back, you should always be willing, like, always be wanting to do the best job you can possibly do.
100%.
And that's not going to happen if you get too complacent in your role. And actually, what I mentioned before, like, if you do go to a new role, then that kind of alleviates that a bit because you're doing something new. But if you go back and do that same thing summer after summer, there is a point where you can you're you're just doing it. It's all just like muscle memory. Like you know what's
Muscle
going on. But I feel like whether that's like, I don't know, just doing something you didn't do the previous summer, whether that's bringing something new to camp or taking part in an activity that you haven't done before, but like just always trying to do something a bit different every summer you go back, I think is very, very important. Yeah, that was 5, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. Keep on your toes, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. Also, last thing I mentioned, actually, because I know money is an important factor for people. And obviously, we don't lie about the pay you get there. We know that you're not going over there to make money. Camp isn't about going over there and making a bunch of money. But one good thing about being a returner is you can negotiate a salary.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to also do that. Obviously, you're not going to be making heaps. You're still not going to be making heaps of money. But because you're returning, camp directors are willing to listen to that, kind of have those conversations with you. So don't be afraid to negotiate your salary as well.
I love that. 6 bonus one there.
Yeah, there you
as
go.
well.
Gave you an extra one for free.
I was going to say. Well, first off, Byron, I appreciate you jumping on. It's nice for you to be this side of the camera as opposed to sort of that side of the camera. But as someone with 7 years experience, man, it's definitely insightful and really interesting for people to hear what keeps you coming back and back and back. So nice one for jumping on.
Yeah, I'd just like to say one last thing, but shout out to you as well.
Appreciate that, man.
For being the spearhead of this, because I definitely know that I couldn't do what you've been doing for the last 13 episodes. So I just want to give a big shout out to you for making this happen.
Good guests make it easy, doesn't it?
Yeah. But no, it's been a pleasure, and I hope we can do more of this in the future. But yeah,
Season 3 incoming.
Yeah, we'll see.
Nice one. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Camp Leaders podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to pop us a like and subscribe and follow for more summer camp content.